Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
Today we're hanging out with Jon Kaplan. He's going to show us his studio, but we're going to talk to him a little bit about the recent news. Depending on when you're listening to this, we don't know yet, but Jon has been nominated for Album of the Year, the Grammy for Album of the Year for the Black Pumas, the work he did on that record, mixing that record. And we're pumped just to have a buddy that is nominated in such a big category, one that's actually on television. Holy smokes.
Mm-hmm.
So Jon had so graciously offered to give us a little studio tour and hang out with us a little bit and talk about how that record was mixed and where it was mixed and show it to us firsthand. So welcome, Jon. Good to see you, buddy.
Hey, how are you?
Congratulations.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So we don't, like we said, we don't know if he won yet or not. In the future, when you watch this, it may be a done deal already. But it's just such a cool thing to be nominated in one of the premier categories.
Big one. That's one of the big awards.
Yeah, it's an honor. And those guys they deserve all the credit they're getting. I'm just happy to be a part of their little ride. They've been great, just great story. A band from Austin, just kind of cranking it out in a cool retro genre, but they made a very cool new record. And I don't know, just happy to have been involved and to watch it continue to grow and continue to get props and have my name affiliated, you know?
And you've been on so many records that have been nominated for Grammys. When I was out there in 2017, we were trying to hook up, but you were nominated for something that same year when I was out there. And it just seems like every year it's kind of like Mike Shimshack's calling me saying, yeah, Jon's nominated. Yeah, Jon's nominated. Yeah, Jon's nominated.
I was fortunate to sit in a Jon. I just have fallen into some good projects, let's put it that way. But, you know, guilt by association, I like to say, you know, you're only as good as the things you're working on. But yeah, I think it'll be this is my 8th nomination, I believe. I won
awesome.
one a couple years back for Album of the Year for Christian Album of the Year for Zach Williams, which was my only win and it was awesome. Yeah, wait, I should have put the Grammy out in the studio for the tour.
A funny story is that Jon centers his Grammy on his mantle.
We can walk in, I guess, while we're talking.
It's like an R-tone. It keeps it right in the center.
People in the house, it's always slightly off center after they clean, like every week.
Oh, there it is.
Right. So I'll come and this is just a joke. Like, you know, we have a woman who's been cleaning her house for a while and it could just be like that. And it's always like she's just trying to get me, like maybe Shaq jokes, like maybe like her like friend worked on the album that lost that year or something. So she just comes in and kind of just like, you know.
Dude, so how is that when people come over to the house? Do they just want to? Are they afraid to touch it? Do they ask to touch it?
Yeah. People ask to touch it, and you know, it's great. I give it to them, and they hold it, and it's heavy and nice. And you know, you got one of those. You know what it's like.
Yeah,
you got multiple. You have 2 of them, don't you?
Well, I'm gonna say no comment, so people think I have 2 Grammys, but no, I have,
Okay,
I have one physical Grammy.
Yeah, that's right. So that's plenty.
But Mike told me a great story about how you found out that you were nominated. It wasn't like you were waiting on bated breath, right?
Well, we were in Santa Monica. Well, this was we're New Yorkers, you know, so we
this year.
Say that again, Mikey. You keep cutting out.
2 Grammys this year.
Yeah, he's up for 2 Grammys this year.
So go ahead,
John. I did. And the other one was did some work on the Eurovision movie, the soundtrack it was the Will Ferrell it was a mockery of the Eurovision thing they did. It was on Netflix, so I mixed one of the songs on that as well. So that's another good honor. That's a giant collection of work, and the amount of names and people involved with that project are insane, and just happy to be one of them. But right, so we're New Yorkers. We've been in LA for probably 7 years now, which I guess considered makes us into LA traditionalists, you know, but and the Grammys are always in LA, and I'd been in LA the whole time they were in New York, and I lived there. I'd never was nominated. I never was invited, you know. And then the one year they were in New York, we're out here, I'm nominated, and I was like, you know, instead of sitting and watching the Zoom, my wife's like, let's go to the beach. So we went to the beach. I'm sitting there on the beach, and Santa Monica is probably why this story came up to you. And then you know, scrolling on the phones, bad internet reception. I'm just kind of like, you know, trying to reset. And all of a sudden I win. I'm like sitting on the beach with my wife. I just, you know, it's kind of a cool moment.
Well, tell us how you got notified this year, because that's also a great story.
Your manager do something and you didn't know that right?
Yeah, I didn't think. Well, the Eurovision one came out like in the fall. I don't know when it came out, but it just didn't even occur to me that it would be in this year's Grammy. Like whenever the cutoff was. And also, I assumed. So that was he's texted me a picture of that nomination. I was like, oh, amazing! It's so awesome to be. That's great. The Eurovision, great category. I'm super excited. And then I'm texting with another friend about that. He's like, oh, congratulations. And I see a text from my manager. I don't, pay any attention. And he calls me. He's like, did you just see the text, dude? I'm like, album of the year. And it's just a total surprise. I just didn't think.
Right. So you didn't notice the album of the year when you were still thinking it was the Eurovision thing.
Exactly.
So that had to be just like, how cool is that this is, people imagine, or at least in my mind's eye as a kid, I imagine like, oh, you'll work, you'll get hired, then you'll work and your whole year will be based around this one record and then it will be nominated for a Grammy. And the reality is this is a record that wasn't even, it's a great record, but it wasn't necessarily on your radar to be up for album of the year, right?
Yeah, well, it had a lot of critical acclaim through the years, and it has, they come out of, there's always a one or two that kind of come out a little bit out of left field, and this is the one, they got a big following in their genre, and I don't know. I think it's great. I think a lot of real music lovers just really dig this band. So,
but the point is like you do so much work that you don't even know what's going to be potentially something that is up for a Grammy. It's like
100%.
That was different for me. Like as a kid thinking, what would it be like to be a successful producer?
Oh yeah. This is 30 years late for what I thought it was going to be. I was like, I was in a band, the band broke up. I became a producer. It's like, oh yeah. Within by the time I'm 25, I'm going to have producer of the year and Grammy. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. This is like,
yeah. You just picture your whole year would have been based around this one record that gets all the notoriety. But the reality is you do hundreds, if not thousands of mixes a year, right? You got 365 days in a year. I mean, you're not Billy Decker.
I definitely do hundreds. Yeah.
So you do hundreds of mixes a year, and it's like, okay, every once in a while, something that, it's just a matter of a byproduct of the work, I guess is the point.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's like I always said, like mixing's a bit more of a volume game, production, I love producing, and I've did it for years, and I still do time and again, but you can put your heart and soul into something that takes 3 months, and then for a multitude of reasons, it either never sees the light of day, the band could break up, the band could get dropped. There's a lot of reasons things aren't as successful as you thought it was going to be, all those reasons.
Yeah.
But with mixing, it's more or less, it's a song a day, it might be a little less than that, but you can just have your name on a bunch of different things. And it's just it's a nice, it increases the odds. Let's put it that way.
Well, to change subjects, we are in Nashville and it's freezing. It's December the 8th. And it's so cold that I can barely smoke outside a cigar. I have to hunker down in the parka and cap on.
Right.
You are in Studio City, California. In a t-shirt? What's the temperature there?
It's about 68 right now. It's actually a little overcast and chilly for us. The mornings are in the 40s. You wake up cold, but then the sun starts to come out, and it's generally, there'll almost always be a time where it's in mid 70s during the middle of the day.
Oh, so nice.
It is.
So
nice.
for you,
it's hard to go backwards.
Those of you who are listening to this, to the audio-only version of this podcast, what you don't see is that John's standing outside, like in what looks to be like Greece or some beautiful.
We have a small little backyard, but it's well
Mediterranean country.
Yeah, it definitely has a vibe. Yeah.
So why don't you take us in and show us where you do work that eventually ends up being Grammy worthy?
Well, we have a converted garage here, which I've opened the door to the garage door I opened. So it's nice when I'm not working on, lets a little light in and lets it breathe in here. So when I'm not working intricately, I can have the garage door open, or, there's always an hour. It's not a fully soundproof room. We kind of moved to this house and I threw some stuff around in the space. I had, some, I had some baffling and I had some bass traps, and I just kind of put them in and it sounded great. So I didn't really overthink it, but some point of every day, one of the neighbors is having a leaf blower. So you got to take a break because you can hear it too much. I wouldn't want to be doing any high end recording in here because it would be, we do vocals, but that's kind of the LA experience. I say, I almost named my little production company, Leaf Blower Records, because it's just, that is the LA, unless you're really, really, really soundproofing your room. So yeah, just I have a wall of tchotchkes and some, little awards and some records. I've some nominations and some some gold records and platinum
So,
records because I'm awesome.
what I'm seeing here to describe this to those who aren't watching but listening is maybe a single car garage, right? Or is this like a car
Yes,
and a half?
it's I think it's a 2-car garage. It would be a 2-car garage. Or
What would you say the
I don't
dimensions?
know, Mike. You've been in here. I'm so bad at that, dude.
Yeah,
I would say
It's probably 14 by 14 or something like that.
Okay.
I think it's a little bigger than that.
A little bit bigger.
Maybe. No, maybe you're right. But it has, it basically came in, it had workbenches, which I've left. It has a very diverse, it has like this ceiling is,
bungalow
is
roof.
broken. So the natural sound just disperses really well in here. I found, some bass traps. I got a big trap back here and the luggage doesn't hurt, holding it back there to help with some traps.
A big curtain along behind the mix position.
Just kind of more or less, there's good storage back there. So that blocks that off. That storage also serves as a bass trap. It's like, big, deep pockets of storage. And, I put some reflecting things. The garage had some reflecting shit behind it, behind it as well.
Oh, yeah. I see the giant couch and stuffed bear back there for cuddling.
Yeah. So when the door's closed, it's really pretty.
It's vibey as hell in there. It's amazing.
Vibey. It sounds great. I moved in and I sent a mix to a friend very quickly, and I was like, oh man, it was the middle of some mix, and is the bottom end okay? He's like, dude, it sounds great. So it just translated really well immediately.
I see you have what look like, is it just curtains that would be hanging on that garage door, or are those actually absorbers?
They're curtains. They don't really do much absorb. I have like a set of these baffles they kind of fell, so they're a little broken right now. I need to fix them. But just like some dispersion guys. And I don't know how much they're doing. They're there. I put them up. I left them. But it sounds really good in here, and it translates really well out of here. So
that's something. All those years that you, me, and Mike spent in Stork designed rooms, or these rooms.
And some of them didn't sound that great, or they
always sounded horrible to me.
Or you'd leave one and be like, "Oh, the mix sounded great," but it'd be dark out when you took it out, or it'd be, I'm not a huge guy of liking to take my mix to another source and listen. It's just not, I don't know. I kind of, when I leave the studio, I want to be done a little bit. I want to close my brain if I can. These days, if I'm really overnighting something, I will just, the check I will do just out of the phone speaker, because that is like, there's a value to that. You can hear some things that it just reveals things, and just making sure that, is everything translating with that little speaker. But other than that, I try not to really listen too much outside the studio. So having a space that, I've had so many little spaces. There were rooms I worked in, or I was attached to another studio. So sounded great, but to check the bass, you had to walk over here and make sure the bottom end was good, and then you had to run back over here. This space, it really sounds great in the mix position. I did some speaker adjusting to like find the sweet spot, but with the speakers where they are off the wall, like it really translates well.
It's really inspirational. You may not be Jon Kaplan yet, but you have a room in your house or at Access that you could build a space like he's built and become him one day. It's inspirational to me. It's like, used to be that the price of admission to be in making a record was millions of dollars worth of gear and getting the right connections at a big studio and waiting for years for your opportunity to shine. But for me, if I were a kid, I'd be like, I can do this. I could find a spot, make it cool and vibey like John's place, and then I could just become Jon Kaplan. I can work hard and become great. Hopefully, that's the goal. And I just think
that's who you aspire to. Go for it, man. But
I just think it's cool that you can do that.
But I think it's an amazing new norm. The technology has made it affordable. My joke I always like to say is, there's been a lot of terrible sounding records made on really expensive equipment in big studios. So it's like what you do with the tools are everything, and the tools are just available to you now. I mean, like, my stuff's not cheap, but it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff like it used to be to even start the conversation, and you could definitely get away with less,
It's cool that people, they have a shot at it. It's not like they have to like go and win the lottery to do it. And are you totally in the box?
Yeah, I do. I have a summing mixer, which is the dangerous, let me move this guy here.
Do yourself a favor, folks. If you're listening on the iTunes, the Spotify stream, or the Deezer stream, go to YouTube and search the From the West Barn podcast in this episode. It's really cool to see it. I mean, we're trying to do our best to describe everything to you, but
now I'm just bending down with a laptop, so I'm trying to see if I'm showing you what I think I am.
Yeah, I see a symphony.
So straight up, I basically mix in Pro Tools. I'm a big UAD guy, so I have I have 3 satellites. And I use the Dangerous 2-bus. I take 16 outs that come out of the Lynx Aurora, and I split them up like, drum kit might be 3 and 4, kicks and snares 3 and 4, drums 5 and 6, maybe mono bass at a 7, vocal 8, 9, 10 is usually my guitars, 11, 12 is the keyboards, 13, 14 background vocals, 15, 16 is the effects. So I send it all out, and then they go back in through this Apogee Symphony. I use the soft limit feature, which I like. And then I monitor through the Dangerous, what's it called? The Dangerous Monitor LT is the one I have.
Yeah.
So you got the little box there for that. Here's my UADs. I'm running HD native Pro Tools. I'm a Pro Tools guy. This is the new Pro Tools. Everyone's like, "What is this?" I just updated because there's a new
dark mode.
There's a new dark mode. It's amazing how weird it looked to me at first. I'm using it for a week now. It looks completely normal to me. But
I think it looks cooler.
What's below that?
But just when you first start. You have a second monitor. Look, just so you guys want to see, check out this beautiful studio in the Netherlands, because that's the email that just came in from Mike Shimshack right before you guys showed up.
Yeah, we just released that.
There's probably a text that you shouldn't have seen about some money.
It's too blurry. Don't worry.
Yeah.
All right. So I see you got NS10s. What's powering your NS10s?
I have this old school. It's upside down. This Yamaha was like the P200, I think it is.
Yeah.
The P2201, and I had like when I first moved studios, I think I had this Samson powering. I used to be in this. My buddy Pete Robinson, I think, gave this to me because I needed it when I went off on my own from a studio we shared together, and it just didn't sound great, but I worked with it. And then I was looking for an amp for years, and people like Brystons and Haflers. It was a little bright for me, the Bryston especially. And my buddy, I think did you have McNair on your podcast, Dave McNair?
Not yet.
No.
Oh yeah, McNair's buddy's a mastering guy, mixer, super talented guy. He's like, "Oh, you got these old Yamahas," and I didn't know what he was talking about. And the minute I saw a picture of that amp, I remember it was always in the racks at the studios I like to work at. This giant thing. The thing, I think it cost me $200, and I think it was like $200 in shipping because it weighs like 100,000 pounds. This thing.
Yeah,
but
Paul saying that to us, he said that's the only way you're supposed to amp up NS10s is with a Yamaha amp.
Well, he just said people love it. Yeah, a lot of people use the Brysons, but I love it. And the minute I put it on, it's like it really works well for me. So I've had that for years.
And what's the other things? Are those like what are your other monitors there?
These are ProAx Studio 100s, which were studio classic. A lot of the guys were using them when I was starting to get into this. My mentors, Dorsman, Jason Goldstein was a buddy I learned a lot from. I know Kevin Killen was using them, Joe Furlow, right when I was kind of starting to get monitors. I always liked them when I heard them. This is kind of right before the revolution of all these power, like the Genelecs were the first really powered and some of those Tannoys, but now there's so many good powered monitors. This was like a little before that. They're definitely hi-fi speakers, but I really do dig them. And I power them with this Audio Research, which is a nice, good amp.
And where do you spend most of your time? On NS10s?
But I spend time on the ProX too. And when clients are here, I use the ProX for sure. I also do some decent amount of mixing out of this. The good old Infinity. That's actually being powered by the Samson. It's a little mono thing that I just checked.
A little mono speaker looks like it, but it has an actual input, not a Bluetooth input.
Yeah, it's actually wired in. And then I sometimes Bluetooth out of this guy because I used to back.
Well, it looks like a boom box.
Yeah.
That's wild looking. It looks like that Waves plugin for that producer. What's his name? The Butch Vig plugin.
Yeah, I don't know when I had this, years ago, and I found it, and like it was behind a bunch of crap. So
you've been using the same monitors for a long, long time.
Long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've poked around. I almost upgraded maybe 5 years ago to some of the. I looked at it, brought in a bunch of the higher end powered ones, some Focals, some, I don't remember what else I was listening to at the time. And I almost did it. And I went back to my Pro X, and I really liked them. I'm getting a little bored these days. I might do a little tour around again.
And your NS10s do not have the tissue paper over the tweeters. I guess that's
No.
you attributed to your amplifier.
I think so. Like, I think when I didn't know what was bug. I have more knowledge now with what I like and don't than when I was searching for this. But I think part of the reasons people were putting them on then was because of those amps, like the Brystons, and it was a
Hafler 2500s, everyone recommended for those.
Yeah,
the Transnova stuff, or right before the Transnova. So this is a room that you have mixed out of for how long?
4 years.
4 years. And before that, your situation was a room in your house, or was it a garage?
A room. No, I had another standalone in. It's like a standalone little house.
Little house or something.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really have plumbing, but it was a little standalone room. That was the old house I lived in, which was just more of a box. But that one sounded good. But again, because of its nature of being a little bit squarer, it wasn't as good. This room translates a lot better. I think just purely like all this different reflective stuff just takes the room out of the room,
Right. And just so people know, right now the garage door is open. You wouldn't normally mix with the garage door open.
Yeah, you know what? I work with it for a while. When I get intricate, I slow it down. But I work depending on what I'm working on. There's a decent amount of the mixing that's busy work too. So I might enjoy the outdoors when I'm getting stuff set up or replacing samples or cleaning toms or something. So some parts of it. Now I can hear some of the yard work happening across the street right now. So that I would now close the garage door if it wasn't.
Well, we don't hear it, so you don't have to if you don't want to. I just think it's cool, man. There's a certain amount of confidence that has to come from a guy that's able to mix something nominated for Album of the Year and all these other Grammys that you've had in a space. I mean, it shows that you have a philosophy. You know what you want out of sounds, and you don't have to be in some perfectly balanced room.
I'm a big guy with the room is very well balanced. It's not perfectly balanced. I don't know what perfectly balanced exactly is. You learn your room. You're going to learn it
That's what I meant. Not like what people would call a high-profile studio.
Yeah, sure, but
it's impressive. It really points the light on you.
I think you can do it in any room. I think the money needs to be spent on sound treatment in any room, and that's like people look for monitors and they look for this other thing. I think the most important thing you spend money on is what that room sounds like. And this room happened to sound. I still have $5,000 worth of room treatment in it, but you can do that in your room for, reflections, bass traps, couches or bass, sussing it so that it works. You can kind of wiggle your way there. And there are holes in this room, but I know I've learned how to compensate for them. I do have an EQ on my mix that I've took after a bunch of years, and I've done some room testing. The nature of one side is a little different than the other, which for the low end, the way it escapes, but low end is basically mono. I have a sub down there, so I don't really sweat the imaging of the low end. I just trust it, and it's right. So yeah, you learn that, there's tiny holes in it, but the convenience, and I really just, you learn your room.
Yeah. It makes me have a lot of respect for guys. Cause that's like, that guy knows, like when I say that guy, I mean, guys that are able to make records in non-traditional, at least what people ideologically think are like where you should be mixing records. That makes me think that guy really has some confidence. He has opinions.
I'm just comfortable in my decision. Yeah, that's what it is. I know what I want things to sound like. Like I always say, some plug-in, it's darker, brighter. It's like, well, okay, people compare different, there's 3 or 4 versions of the SSL channel strip kind of plug-in, right?
Right.
Someone's like, oh, I like that one. It's got a little more bottom. I was like, okay, well, I use mine. I would just add a little more bottom to it. Like I'm still using my ears for everything. That's just the way. And you might not like my mix as someone else's, but it's going to be the mix I want to give you no matter where I do it, essentially, is kind of the way I live with it, And,
Mike says you have an interesting routing scenario. Oh, this is the record.
It's just showed up. It's the deluxe version vinyl. They just literally showed up yesterday.
So he's holding up a Black Pumas record. Is this a deluxe version? So this is
but
like
they put out this
LP
cool vinyl,
thing.
Very cool vinyl package they just sent me, which is cool.
You have a vinyl player,
yes,
a record
my
player?
Routing is essentially it's based around the summing mixer. I mean, I guess I can kind of.
And your summing mixer, you never change, right? I mean, for recallability, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So, people ask about, I like analog gear. I miss twisting knobs sometimes, but these days, there's just so many things back and forth. Some projects of this project had been through so many different revisions, and they added some additional production. So it's just the amount of the ability to, if I had to think about recalling stuff, some days I might open up 5 different projects or 5 different songs going through recalls. So it used to be you book a day in the studio, the assistant had to redial every single knob back in to be exact. And it was never exact. This is, within seconds I'm open and might just want to like, hey, can we mute that hi-hat and the bridge? And all of a sudden I'm open, it's muted, and I'm done. And that task is off my list, as opposed to, thinking deeper than that. So, yeah, I use the summing mixer. So I also have, so my front end, when I do vocals and stuff, I have a really nice kind of recording chain, which is,
Oh, I see.
it's a Heritage, 1073 kind of knockoff, and this double wide by Retro, which is a really, really nice warm compressor. I just love it.
What's that supposed to be? Is that supposed to be like a stay level, or like what's
I don't think it's supposed to be anything. I think it's the stay level is what made them kind of well known. It's kind of a next step of that. It's like a 2-stage tube thing, I believe. Just really creamy, sounds really nice. And then just a couple APIs in case I want to record a couple acoustics or something on.
And that
So here's my mic. You want to see my mic collection? This.
Oh, your mic locker. You got 2 451s.
2 451s.
They're in the unplugged area of his 500 rack.
And my high end
SM7B
microphone here. And there we go. It's a little dusty.
So that Heritage stuff is pretty cool. That was they're out of Spain, and they do reissues that are point-to-point correct. Like you could take cards out of them and put them supposedly in the original Neve stuff. Like all the voltages, every single part is like compliant to circuit path. And I hear they sound great. And that's a
it sounded great. At the
there.
time I knew I wanted to, I'm a big Neve guy. I worked on Neves for years, and just a lot of people were doing good versions of them. I think BAE makes really nice ones, and it literally had gotten good reviews. I tried it. I loved it, so it's a really just nice, easy vocal chain. I like to do a little EQ to tape if I can. I like the top end of it. It's a little creamy. So it's just a nice thing to have when you do need to cut vocals.
So when you're mixing these records, they go out, they get summed by those subgroups you talked about down to 2 channels from 16.
Down to 2 channels.
That comes back into Pro Tools. You say you're hitting it with a soft limit. Does that mean that you're really pushing level on that?
No, I just it's just a little bit of a tape extra thing. I don't. I come back in. I shoot for like -6 probably back in.
Now, does that even hit the soft limit then, or would soft limit only live
I've
up
noticed
near
a minor
0?
It's just a tone thing. I just think it adds.
Okay.
It's just the color. I think it just adds a minor saturation color. Yeah. Frankly, I for years used this. What was it? The PSX 100 that I had. That was my A to D. That was the Apogee one.
Oh,
it's an earlier version,
16,
and I just mixed into that forever, and I did hit that one more when I was learning to mix, and I just kind of started relying on it. And then when that thing crapped out, I took this, bought this, replaced it real quick in the middle of a mix. I was A-Bing. I like better with soft limit on, so I literally leave it on. I figure it's a little extra level of safety, but it just does a tone thing that I kind of like. Adds maybe a little bit of warmth. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I think so what I like about summing in general is just headroom. I think the biggest issue with computer mixing is it's very easy to have things bunch up and kind of, hit the wall and start to sound a little thick and compressed in ways you don't really like before they even get there, limited, saturated, maybe in ways you're not looking for. So what this gives me is an ability to kind of have all my instruments leave under control, basically. They come into this summing mixer. I don't know that I need it. I don't know that I couldn't make it sound the same without it, but there's just some little magic. I think Danger is just a great company. There's just a little bit of sparkle that happens in there that I just like. It comes back every time I mix with or without it. I'll work on like a demo if I'm producing something. I'll make my mix. I'll really enjoy it. I'll have it sounding great. And I was like, all right, let me see what it sounds like stemmed out. And I always like it better stemmed out. So it just provides a little bit more width and depth, and and I think I did notice when I switched, the clock on the Apogee is wonderful as well, and it really just bottom end is tight, and it's a really nice addition. So the summing does that for me, and I come back in. I said -6 or something back in, and then I work my stereo bus chain. So now it's like, all right, what's on your stereo bus? And I do a lot of different work. I'll have an SSL. Currently I have a bunch of stuff on this. I might A/B or try. Some of them are on, some of them aren't. I'm EQing. This is the return.
Oh, wow, look at all those plugins on there. Yeah, SSL.
Yeah, and I use them. I don't use them. Currently, I'm using them all.
Shadow Hills, Massive Passive.
This is adding a little bit of tape on the Phoenix.
Okay.
This one's doing a little bit of spreading, the ozone thing.
Oh yeah.
Which I tailored to songs. This is kind of a dancey thing. So I'm using a little bit of this OTT, which adds a little bit of a punchy thing. Gotta be very careful with this guy, but it's a really good, like a remix. Remixers use this thing a lot. Really good sounding box. I got this guy adding a little saturation, and I really tune where the crossovers are. It's just like it's the Brainworks BX Saturator. It's a UAD thing. A little bit goes a long way, but on this track, it's adding a lot. It's adding a lot of glue. And this guy's on everything. The Oxford Inflator is my favorite.
What's it called?
Just the Sonax Oxford Inflator.
Okay. Yeah.
It's kind of it's the thing I like the most for just adding size and limiting without hearing it. Basically.
So you mix these records, they go out to stems, the stems return, all 16 return to 2 channels. And on that 2 channels, your master bus, you do a bunch of 2 bus processing.
And then that gets printed as my mix.
And then you go out through buses and print that as your mix.
Yeah, that's exactly. And then I simultaneously print a limited version for like the A&R or for approval because you're competing with other things. I try and stay within 2 dB of limiting. And I mess around with which ones. I use this Limitless by DMG Audio a lot. I also use it's the activator right now with the Fab Filter Pro L. I use the Sonax limiter. So I might mess around. Sometimes it just inspires me in the mix a little bit, but generally the limiter is not meant to color the sound.
So when you're making let's say you finish a mix, what do you call that? Do you date it? How do you reference?
I just name it. I'm like JFK M1 and MH1 is the hot one. And I print them both simultaneously. They get the hot until they're, the H1 until they're approved. And then it's JFK M1, Rev 1, Rev 2, Rev 3, whatever, until we're done. If new information comes in, like if they get like this one started as one production, then a new producer kind of added some tracks. So it's like the mix was basically done and they decided they want to change the production. So I'll rename that as JKM2. And then the revisions based on that.
Well, yeah. Oh man, I had a question.
Am I
literally jumped right in my head. Oh, are you saving like, does each one of those, like, let's say they get through revision 5 and they're like, you know what, revision 1 was great. You have all those saved differently?
They're all just saved in each set. The sessions are saved and they're all just printed simultaneously on new playlists in here. So
but you could get back, like, let's say they worked you through 5 revisions, you can get back to revision 1.
I can just open that session up and it's going to be exactly revision 1.
Okay, got it. Good. And whenever you're sending these mixes out, you're sending out a limited version and an unlimited version?
No, I just send the limited version. And then when the mastering comes into play, I send the unlimited. And now they're all asking for it is they want to hear both versions so they can know what I did in limiting. So I'll send the limited version as well. And I've spoken to guys about like Randy Merrill, mastered. I've known Randy for years and he started mastering some stuff for me recently. And he said sometimes he'll use the limited one if that sounds better to him. So he likes to have both. So if it's
how interesting is that?
That sometimes there's some magic in that one. And look, I'm not smashing. I'm doing a lot of compression in my mixes. Don't get me wrong, but my stuff has space. It's got air. It's not a smash to bits limited thing I'm sending him. So there's still some room for him to work usually, but I think more often than not, they use the unlimited.
When you are you just taking the limiter off? Everything else stays on. All the inflator, all the everything stays.
Yeah, every single thing is being printed, like this whole chain. So it goes out my summing things, comes back in, runs through all of this, and gets recorded. That's my mix. And then that mix is simultaneously being recorded to a limiter. This is not being recorded on this track. It's simultaneously being printed on this one. So this is their hearing. This is the limited version. The only difference between these two is the limiter. So that's going to be approved. And then when we're done, I send both. So this one will also have, you can look at the.
Send both to mastering.
Yeah. And,
Got it.
They're all zoomed in on right now, but you can see the difference basically of my limited and not limited,
Yeah. And loud is better. That's,
Look, there's a loudness war thing. It is what it is, but.
People will always pick the louder mix. But yeah, I mean, you have to at least give them a chance to hear it against what they were referencing the rough mix of, which is.
And I go out of my way. I'll bring down the output of the limiter, and I'll A/B to make sure it's not doing something I don't like to the mix.
Are you sending MP3s or WAV files as references?
I usually send waves. I upload it to Dropbox and send them a link is my normal thing.
And you're working at 2448?
I work at whatever the session comes in at.
Oh, true.
So for years, there was a lot of debates back in the day. And I think some of the debates had to do with earlier digital technology wasn't really as good. The converters were bad. So the difference between 44 and 48, a lot of it had to do with, I think early on, the filters were really an issue. So you weren't hearing,
filters.
So they were coming much lower into your ear range because they sucked. So now they're great. I think all this digital stuff sounds pretty good. So for years it was 48 was the pro way. There were arguments about it. I always liked 44 because I think Bob Clearmountain had said, might as well, or Bob Ludd, one of the big dogs, had said something like, you'd always be recording at the same sample rate you're finishing at, which at the time was CDs, which was 44.1, but then film stuff would be 48. So it was always a confusing process.
It's always a mess.
So everyone was in 48, so I switched to 48, even though I was a 44 guy. And now everyone seems to be 44, and I literally think it's because the default on like Logic or Ableton is 44. So I think a lot of the pop records that are coming in are being done in Logic and Ableton by dudes that aren't overthinking that. Frankly, they're opening it up and they're making sounds, and it sounds good, and they're sending them out the door.
Right.
So,
and you wouldn't necessarily recommend anyone, like if they said, "Hey, we're going to start from scratch. We want your opinion. Should we do it at 96K? Should we do it at 44?"
I think 96, frankly, I'd rather, if I get a 96 record almost often, depending on if it's a pop record or a modern thing, I'm going to downsample to mix. It minimizes my ability to control it a lot of the time. I use a lot of high-end plugins, and it's like already I have 3 satellites. So I would have to have 6 satellites to do.
Yeah.
If that was the demand and everyone was calling for it, then I would change, I would.
Well, I've noticed some of my plugins don't even show up in the 96K. I'm like, where's my, and I'm like,
oh really?
96K.
Yeah. I don't do it much. If it's like big, it's classical or big jazz or big open room, I do think there's you'd notice a difference. But today's, like we said, loudness wars. Once you're jamming all this stuff in, I don't think and people are listening on MP3s and people are listening through their, laptop speaker. I think the difference between 96 and 48 is getting lost in that personally.
Thanks for hanging out with us. But before we let you go, I wanted to know, like, what does a normal day for you look like? Do you wander out to the studio around 11 a.m.? Do you start at 8 in the morning? What's your regular day?
If I'm busy, I'm an early riser. I get up. I usually come out here for like a half hour or an hour just to kind of like take whatever I woke up, whatever stress of what I have on my list off for the day. And then maybe I'll take a break. I'll go exercise, and I really hit it, 10 or 11. I'll work for probably, 6-7 hours on and off all day. I take a lot of breaks, a lot of ear breaks. So, I work out of the house. So, there'll be some responsibility in the house I have to do. My son, of course, because of COVID, is home for, he's homeschooling now through that. So online learning. So I'll take a break and hang out with him, but generally that's my day.
Well, awesome, dude. Thanks for taking the time to show us through your setup. It's cool to see a warm climate and a smiling face. You're both of those things. Man. So
thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. Mikey, you want to?
I was just going to say that what people can't see is there's a light halo coming down from the opening in his ceiling that makes it.
There it is.
It's like
I don't know how to get it on me.
Well, awesome. That's it. Thank you so much, Jon Kaplan. Congratulations on your Grammy nomination.
Thank you.
We're rooting for you, and it's just cool to see the way these records are being made and the people that are making them. Thank you for being so great and gracious and showing us around your room. We'll put links to you down in the description. We have all those from our previous episode.
Awesome.
That's it for this one. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you. We're signing off from the West Barn.